We've identified a new asbestos-related disease, and we're figuring out ways to avoid it.
Her story lives on in each and every one of you.
Firefighters that have lost their lives, that have really put everything on the line.
Firstly, I would like to thank ADAO for inviting me here to learn and to share the knowledge that is in this room. And also, I would like to thank everybody who is out there on the internet, because they are also part of our community, and in a sense, they are also in our room. So thank you for watching and share the knowledge. So, one of the most fundamental principles of law is this: do no harm. Do not do unto others what you would not want to be done to you. For instance, if you know about a danger that is happening, that is threatening somebody, for instance, you see somebody walking towards a steep cliff, then you have a moral duty to warn him. The knowledge creates the duty to warn. And that's an important thing in this story about the Rotterdam Convention. Because that is basically what the convention is about. It is not so much about taking actions. The convention is about warning. No. And that's the whole reason, basically, for the convention to exist. And from that come many other aspects. I'll show you a few. Okay, so this moral duty to warn has several implications. It endeavors to advance responsible trade, to encourage environmental justice, and it also places in a legal shape a duty to inform on exporting countries regarding dangerous materials and chemicals, and that is considered a basic human right. So it's a really important level regarding law. Now, the treaty came into effect as of 2004, and there are at present 150 member states or more, and the number is still increasing. Now, the next one, please. How did the Rotterdam Convention came to be? When the realization dawned that chemicals can be dangerous and that there is basically a double standard, because many chemicals have been prohibited in Western countries, but were not prohibited from being sold in, for instance, developing countries. This awareness came about at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, and it was seen that on the one hand, chemicals are essential for fighting poverty. So there's a good reason not to ban chemicals outright in the general sense. But then on the other hand, there is this double standard, for instance, with regard to chemicals and materials, which are dangerous and are prohibited here for very good reasons, but not in other countries. And they are still being sold there, basically for one word, I'll call it greed. So a resolution was made at the Rio Earth Summit, and it involved this: that it is a moral and also a legal duty to give fair warning of any dangers of such materials and chemicals before importing them into other countries or exporting them to other countries, and only for countries to import these materials after they have given an informed consent to do so. You can compare it to a dangerous operation, for instance, that you would not agree to unless you knew of all the dangers. So, a moral and a legal duty. Still going well? Okay, now, how does it work? You have to consider that there is a group of independent scientists, all very highly regarded internationally, and they are called the Chemical Review Committee. It is their job to have no political interests, no commercial interests, basically no interests but the truth. And they will decide on the basis of solid and widely accepted science whether any chemical or material is harmful to such an extent that it should be placed on the list of the European Convention. Now, I simply call it the list, perhaps even with capitals, but it is also known as Schedule number 3 or even Annex number 3 in Roman numerals, so that we're all talking about the same thing. I'll just call it the list of hazardous materials and chemicals. So the scientists discuss this, they agree on this, they place a material, let's for instance call it chrysotile asbestos, because that's what we're here, of course. They place it on the list and they say, we recommend that all the materials that are on this list be voted on every 2 years by the member states of the Rotterdam Convention to be included formally in the official, the final list. And with regard to chrysotile asbestos, this has happened right from the start. It has always been recognized right from the start of the Rotterdam Convention that chrysotile asbestos is so dangerous that it is such a commonly held view that it should be listed as part of the Rotterdam Convention on this annex, on this list, this schedule. Right from the start, it has always been agreed asbestos is cancerous, carcinogenic. There is no safe limit. Now, how does it proceed from there? How does it work in practice? Say that a certain subject, a substance, makes it onto this list of hazardous substances. What happens then? Now, suppose that you have a ship filled with something very hazardous to health, and you bring it to a port in, let's say, India, or anywhere else for that matter. Then you have a moral duty to warn the harbor authority that you are carrying a shipload of something that is dangerous, and that, for instance, the dock workers have a duty, that there is a duty for dock workers to be warned that their work is dangerous and that they should take special safety measures for their health and safety. And this duty to inform does not only regard, of course, the dock workers, but also the people who would transport the material and the people who would work with it, and then the people who would sell it, and the consumers, and finally when it comes into some kind of waste dump and becomes part of the environment, there is a long line to be considered. And it all starts with knowledge, and I did say from the outset that knowledge creates a duty to warn. And I'll say again, with regard to chrysotile asbestos, there has always been a complete consensus between these scientists and indeed for all but the asbestos producing countries that asbestos is dangerous, it's carcinogenic, and I'll say it again, there is no safe limit. So the question begs itself, why isn't chrysotile on the list? And that one is easily answered. I suspect that we all in this room know the reason why. It has been consistently proposed, but at the start, Canada objected to inclusion. And we do understand why that was, of course, as Canada had the asbestos mines. It had an economic interest, and that was considered by Canada to be far more important than the health of the rest of the world. And I'll point out that Canada did indeed agree that asbestos is dangerous. It had its own prohibitions nationally, but that still was no reason to say no at the convention. And for those who don't know, the voting procedure has to be unanimous. If there is only one single country that says no, then chrysotile won't make it on the list. Now, in 2013, the asbestos mines were basically finished, and Canada very graciously decided that it would no longer object at the Rotterdam Convention. How very wonderful. And then, of course, straight away, like that, Russia decided, well, if Canada isn't going to do our work for us anymore, we'll become a member to the Rotterdam Convention, and we'll say "niet" instead of no. And that happened the last time, in 2013. So, the convention is held every 2 years. The next one will be in May of this year. And we can safely expect that Russia again will say "niet" to the inclusion of chrysotile asbestos. And in its wake, several other asbestos exporting countries, for instance, Zimbabwe, India, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Kyrgyzstan, and Vietnam. But the main thing is, it takes just one single vote for the whole list, for basically the proposal with regard to chrysotile asbestos to be included on the list, to be wasted, to be destroyed. Now, I have to say, this is all about informed decisions. This is all about sharing the truth. And however often Russia will say, well, it can be safely used. It can be safely used in control. And let's see, where are we? A bit further on, please. And still a bit further on. No, this one, please. Sorry. It is important to realize that the exporting country, because of its membership of the Rotterdam Convention, has a legal duty on its producers, for instance, to warn properly how asbestos, or sorry, any other material should be handled, any material on the list, how it should be identified, how it should be safely handled. There is some paperwork involved. The costs of the paperwork are actually, I understand, negligible, something like $25 or the like, simply a piece of paper to hand over to the port authority of the importing country. And it's all about informed decisions. So, this rule of unanimity is becoming a big problem, and we'll be seeing this Kamei. And we see that this is basically a fight on the one hand for the truth and a fight on the other hand for greed. I do believe that truth will win out in the end, but it's going to take a lot of support from all of you and the whole asbestos victims community and all the asbestos sectors concerned to go against Russia and these economic interests. We can expect a big struggle that is going to last a long, long time. So, no, not quite done. May I have the one about, next one, lethal toxic trade? I'm nearly done. That's fine. The next one, please, about the toxic trade. No. The one before. It's really easier to do this yourself, you know. Okay, so at present, and for the foreseeable future as well, Russia is showing a callous disregard for the truth by disregarding globally accepted scientific evidence that chrysotile is carcinogenic, that there is no safe limit. It is placing vicious profit and greed over the protection of the public health. And I'll remind you, whatever is exported to be, for instance, made into car brakes in India is then exported to Australia, and then the Australian people will suffer from asbestos contamination that they weren't expecting. And then eventually the cars, when they become too old, will be exported somewhere else, and it will spread and spread and spread. The main argument of Russia is that asbestos, and specifically chrysotile asbestos, can be used controlled. And that is just, I'll put it plainly, that is just such utter rubbish, because how can you control anything when you don't know about the need to do so, when you haven't been warned about it? I mean, the whole idea of controlled use is just a laugh, a very bitter laugh, I have to say. And basically, these asbestos exporting countries, Russia ahead of them all, they are spreading asbestos diseases. They are spreading asbestos deaths that are completely needless, that are preventable, and they are doing so willfully against the global view, completely accepted that chrysotile asbestos is dangerous, is carcinogenic. So I'll finish now with the next one. Thank you. Without the backing of the Rotterdam Convention and all the member states, it is hard to consider that a global asbestos ban will be realized. We do need the Rotterdam Convention to back up and make effective a global ban. And for that, there is one essential course, and that is the introduction of majority voting at the Rotterdam Convention. I think that as long as there is no majority voting at the Rotterdam Convention, either the whole convention will become completely meaningless, or they will have to take resource to majority voting, and then we will actually see a chrysotile asbestos listing at the convention list on Annex 3. And that is something that we all dearly hope for. So, last but by no means least, I want to thank ADAO for adding its voice, for raising awareness also with regard to the importance of including chrysotile asbestos at the Rotterdam Convention. And I am sure that as ADAO stands for the truth, as do we all, eventually and with determination, the truth will win.